In every man's life there comes a silent collapse, a moment where the expectations he carried since childhood finally dissolve under the weight of reality. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's a quiet breaking, an internal snap that happens when he finally understands that the world will not pause for his pain, will not adjust itself to his wounds, will not bend simply because he's tired. In that moment, the illusion that someone, somewhere, is keeping track of his effort disappears. And strangely, that disappearance is the beginning of a new kind of strength. Because when a man stops waiting to be cared for, he stops waiting altogether. He begins to move with a pace that no longer seeks applause, no longer scans faces for validation, no longer hesitates in fear of misunderstanding. He becomes something sharper, cleaner, harder to manipulate, because nothing is pulling at him anymore. The world remains indifferent, but he becomes indifferent to the world's indifference. This shift is not a single revelation. It is a long erosion. For years, a man is taught to believe that effort earns attention, honesty earns loyalty, vulnerability earns compassion. But life doesn't operate on those currencies. Life pays in results. And the sooner a man abandons the fantasy that everyone around him is obligated to notice his struggle, the faster he discovers that he has been leaking strength through expectations. Because expectation is emotional debt. It ties you to the hope that someone will repay what you believe you're owed. And when that repayment never comes, you collapse. But when you eliminate the debt entirely, you walk with no chains. That is the point where transformation begins. Not when the world supports you, but when you stop needing support to keep moving. The man who accepts that no one cares becomes unpredictable, not because he is hostile, but because he becomes self-contained. He doesn't broadcast his wounds, hoping someone will patch them. He doesn't showcase his suffering as a way to earn sympathy disguised as connection. Most people perform their pain, hoping that attention will soothe what discipline should be solving. But the man who stops performing becomes something else. His silence no longer means suppression. It becomes strategy. He learns that the less he reveals, the less others can use against him. The less he seeks comfort, the less he can be manipulated. And very quickly, his calmness begins to unsettle those who rely on emotional chaos to feel relevant. This is why the indifferent man gains power. Not because he is cold, but because he becomes immune. Once he accepts that affection is optional, but discipline is mandatory, his entire posture shifts. He no longer reacts emotionally to disrespect. He no longer collapses under disappointment. He no longer bargains for attention the way the weak do. Instead, he observes. He endures. He advances. And the world, confused by his lack of neediness, begins to recalibrate around him. People lean in, wondering what he's hiding. They whisper about his certainty, his calmness, his unshakable focus. The very silence that once felt like punishment becomes a crown. Indifference becomes leverage. In the philosophy of power, this is the first real step: emotional independence. Without it, every achievement is fragile, every victory conditional on someone else's approval. But when a man builds his identity without expecting applause, he becomes unmovable. His purpose stops bending to loneliness. His decisions stop trembling in front of uncertainty. He develops what rulers, warriors, and thinkers before him cultivated in solitude: the ability to act without emotional permission. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for admiration. He wrote them because he understood that a man who waits to be saved is already conquered. And that truth remains unchanged across centuries. If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable. Most people fail because they expect fairness. They believe their suffering should earn them kindness. They believe loyalty should come automatically. They believe that being good guarantees protection. But goodness has never been a shield. Loyalty has never been a guarantee. and suffering has never been currency. Power belongs to the man who understands that life rewards effectiveness, not emotion. The man who uses heartbreak to sharpen discipline, rejection to refine direction, and silence to build unbreakable momentum becomes someone the world cannot ignore. He stops expecting the world to carry him and begins carrying himself through fire alone. The world is full of loud men, men who complain, men who seek reassurance, men who speak of ambition but move with hesitation. They want the image of strength without the backbone required to endure solitude. But the rare ones, the quiet ones, the ones who stop explaining themselves and simply act, those men carry an aura that others feel before they understand. Their presence shifts dynamics. Their silence imposes order. Their restraint commands curiosity. This is why indifference, real indifference, is magnetic. It suggests self-sufficiency, a trait so scarce that people mistake it for mystery. Yet it is not mystery. It is mastery. When a man stops needing others, he stops being controlled by them. Emotional dependence is the softest form of slavery. The fear of being disliked, the craving for understanding, the obsession with being seen as good. These are invisible chains. But once cut, the man moves with a freedom that unsettles the weak. They cannot comprehend someone who doesn't chase acceptance, who doesn't collapse when ignored, who doesn't shiver at the possibility of being alone. They call him cold, but he isn't cold. He is clear. He has replaced the desire to be cared for with the hunger to become undeniable. What makes this transformation so powerful is that it is internal. No external achievement is required. No approval, no recognition, no validation. It begins the moment a man stops waiting for others to understand his path. He realizes that suffering is not something to showcase, but something to sculpt. Every disappointment becomes material. Every betrayal becomes stone. Every silence becomes a chisel. This is how a man builds himself into something others cannot break. Not by avoiding pain, but by shaping himself through it. He does not crumble under pressure. He condenses. And then something strange happens. The same world that ignored him begins to take notice. Not because he asked for it, but because power radiates unintentionally. True confidence is quiet. True resolve is soundless. True strength does not advertise itself. People feel it like temperature in a room. They adjust their tone. They measure their words. They become cautious because they sense that the man before them is not emotionally available to be manipulated. His detachment is not apathy. It is authority. His silence is not emptiness. It is dominance held in reserve. This is where the Machiavellian principle emerges fully. The less a man needs from others, the more influence he naturally acquires. People respect what they cannot sway. They admire what they cannot break. They follow what they cannot predict. A man who moves for himself, who decides without seeking comfort, who advances without needing applause, becomes a force. Because he is not operating on borrowed power. He is not borrowing courage from validation. His value is self-generated, and that makes him impossible to dethrone. However, this transformation is not painless. There are nights where the silence feels suffocating, where doubt crawls back in, where the old need for comfort knocks on the door. But those moments are proof of evolution. They are the echoes of a weaker self dying. Growth does not always feel like rising. Sometimes it feels like breaking. But a man must break before he becomes unbreakable. He must lose illusions before he gains clarity. And clarity is what turns him into someone who no longer negotiates with reality, but commands it. Most people crumble because they try to get the world to care. They try to earn recognition by being kind, by being loyal, by being available. But the world rewards none of that unless it benefits from it. This is the truth men avoid. The masses are fickle. Their affection is temporary. Their sympathy is conditional. Their attention is seasonal. If your strength depends on their consistency, you are already lost. But the man who builds without audience, who grows without applause, who hardens without witnesses, he becomes the only kind of man the world cannot discard. And here lies the paradox that reshapes everything. When you stop needing people, people start needing you. Not because you demanded it, but because independence is rare. Strength is rare. Quiet resolve is rare. Most people melt under pressure. The man who doesn't becomes mythic. His story spreads not through his words, but through his survival. Others may have louder voices, but he has deeper gravity. He operates on a plane where noise loses influence, where silence becomes currency, where presence becomes authority. Once a man reaches this level of detachment, he no longer wakes up wondering who cares. His only question is, what must be done? His suffering becomes fuel. His failures become calculations. His challenges become opportunities for refinement. He no longer treats setbacks as injustice, but as instruction. He becomes emotionally sovereign, psychologically untouchable, strategically dangerous. Because he is no longer slowed by the emotional bureaucracy that governs most lives. He stops explaining himself to people who listen only to respond. He stops chasing those who withdraw when there is no benefit. He stops tolerating those who only appear when applause is guaranteed. Instead, he observes behavior with surgeon-like precision. He notes who stays when he offers nothing. He notes who vanishes when he stops performing. He notes who speaks his name only when others speak it first. That information becomes ammunition, not for revenge, but for clarity. Power requires knowing who stands beside you without corrupting your ascent. Eventually, his identity shifts completely. He is no longer the man who suffered silently, who was ignored, who was misunderstood. He becomes the man who advanced without help, who rose without support, who survived without applause. That story rewrites his past. It transforms everything that once felt like punishment into preparation. And those who once doubted him find themselves unsettled by the realization that he no longer needs anything they withheld. By now, he is not driven by hope. Hope is fragile. Hope depends on others. Instead, he is driven by inevitability. The world may remain indifferent, but he is no longer shaped by it. He moves with an internal momentum that cannot be slowed by loneliness, rejection, or neglect. He becomes someone who builds a life on stone, not expectation. And when others finally care, because eventually they do, it no longer matters. His strength is already self-sustaining. This is the final stage. The man who once waited to be rescued becomes the man others wait for. Not because he is loud, not because he demands it, but because he has become the one thing the world cannot resist, inevitable. The man who rises without permission, the man who advances without being carried, the man who moves without being validated. In a world where everyone is begging to be noticed, he stands alone, not asking, not hoping, not needing, only building. And once a man reaches this level of internal dominance, nothing external can break him again. Not silence, not indifference, not abandonment. Because he has learned the truth that transforms weakness into power, no one owes him care. And once he accepts that, he takes back everything that was ever taken from him: his time, his focus, his momentum, his purpose. He becomes the storm they feared would destroy him. And instead, he is the one who destroys everything that stands between him and his ascent. If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable.